The ballroom froze. Crystal chandeliers poured light over silk gowns and tuxedos, but it wasn't the glitter that silenced the room, it was the scream. "Wash off that dirty stink." Her voice cracked through the hall like shattered porcelain. A blonde woman in a magenta gown raised a green bottle high, then tipped it forward. The liquid cascaded, striking the head of the woman beside her. Champagne hissed against dark skin, dripping over a white dress as if erasing dignity itself. The black woman didn't flinch. Her eyes closed, her lips curved into something unsettling, a calm smile. The room gasped louder than the splash. Forks stilled. A violinist in the corner lowered his bow mid-note. A waiter's hand trembled, champagne flute shaking. To everyone else, this was scandal. To her, it was expected. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Amara James. At that table, surrounded by laughter dressed as cruelty, Amara sat tall. Her gown was cut in clean lines. No glitter, no jewels, quiet elegance that didn't ask permission. A lock of champagne-soaked hair clung to her cheek, but she didn't raise a hand to wipe it away. She let it fall, let it shine beneath the chandeliers like proof. The blonde, Charlotte Wynne smirked, gripping the bottle like a trophy. Her words lingered in the air, sticky and vicious. "This isn't your place. Women like you don't belong at galas like this." The insult wasn't whispered. It was projected, a performance for every guest within earshot. Some laughed nervously, afraid to stand out. Others whispered, unsure whether to intervene. At the far end of the table, a man in a black bow tie leaned back, murmuring, "Well, she asked for it." His companion nodded, complicit in silence. But not everyone stayed silent. A young server near the back froze, tray half-tilted, phone in pocket buzzing with impulse. Should he record? Should he stop it? His knuckles whitened around the stem of a glass. His breath caught, because what he saw wasn't just rude, it was history repeating itself. Out loud, in gold-lined china and white linen napkins. Amara finally opened her eyes. The calm was heavier than Charlotte's rage. It was the stillness of someone who had seen storms and chosen to remain unshaken. She looked at Charlotte, not up, not down, straight across. Equal, unbothered. "Are you finished?" Her voice was low, even. It carried further than Charlotte's shout because the room had gone deathly quiet. Charlotte blinked, startled that the woman hadn't cried, hadn't run, hadn't begged. Her grip on the bottle tightened. She wanted more reaction, more spectacle. But Amara's serenity robbed her of power. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One older gentleman dabbed at his forehead with a napkin. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "This feels wrong." He shushed her quickly, eyes darting toward the host's table. No one wanted to move first. And so the ballroom waited, the air charged like a storm before lightning. Amara straightened her shoulders, soaked silk clinging but not bending her frame. She reached for her water glass, lifted it, and drank calmly as if she were alone in her own dining room. That single gesture rewrote the scene, no longer victim, but judge. Charlotte's smirk faltered. The champagne had failed. The night, however, had only just begun. The champagne dripped onto the white tablecloth, tracing rivers of gold that bled into the seams of linen. Yet Amara James did not rise, did not shout. She sat steady, as if the insult had been rehearsed for her arrival. To everyone else, she was simply another guest, an outsider, perhaps a lucky invite. Few knew the truth. The very gala they were attending, this glittering fundraiser held beneath vaulted ceilings and chandeliers, existed because of her signature on a contract, her millions wired weeks earlier. But tonight, she hadn't come as the head of James Global Holdings. She hadn't brought her entourage, her security team, or her brand name stitched across the invitations. She came alone, in a dress chosen not for spectacle but for silence. Ivory silk, clean lines, no glitter, no defense. Her jewelry was almost invisible, a pair of earrings like whispers of light. The only sparkle was her own composure. Across the ballroom, banners bearing the name of the charitable foundation fluttered above the stage. Cameras from the local press waited near the podium. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of generosity, a night to raise funds for children's hospitals. And yet here she sat, humiliated at the table she had paid to reserve, as laughter and whispers replaced applause. Charlotte Wynne, the blonde in magenta who held the emptied bottle, basked in the reaction. Her family name was carved into the marble wing of the museum next door. Old money, old arrogance, dressed in designer confidence. She looked at Amara the way her ancestors might have looked at an intruder on land they never truly owned. "See?" Charlotte said louder, angling for the crowd. "These events attract anyone these days. No standards left." A ripple of discomfort passed through the guests. Some adjusted their cufflinks, others stared into their wine glasses. It was the kind of cruelty that revealed more about the accuser than the accused. Still, the silence of complicity weighed heavy. The maître d', tall and stiff in a black coat, moved toward the table with a forced smile. He leaned to Charlotte first, nodding as if she were the hostess, then shifted his gaze to Amara with suspicion disguised as courtesy. "Madam, may I ask, do you have an invitation to this event? These seats are reserved for distinguished guests." The insult landed sharp, distinguished, as though her presence here had already been judged and dismissed. Amara did not answer immediately. Instead, she dabbed at her cheek with the corner of a napkin, folding it neatly as if nothing had happened. Her silence was not submission, it was calculation. Around the room, eyes lingered. A young couple at a nearby table exchanged a look, discomfort written across their faces. The violinist who had stopped earlier resumed playing, notes trembling with unease. This was the pattern she knew too well. At 23, she had entered her first corporate gala with a borrowed dress, only to be asked if she was helping with the catering. At 30, with her first million earned, she'd been mistaken for the event planner instead of the keynote donor. And now, at 41, with billions under her control, she still wore the same accusations disguised in different voices, updated for different rooms. But she had learned. Power didn't need sequins. Authority didn't need announcement. Sometimes it was better to walk in quietly and let the room expose itself. She placed the folded napkin on the table, looked up and said evenly, "Would you like to see proof?" The maître d' hesitated, caught between politeness and prejudice. Charlotte leaned back, satisfied, as if the spectacle was complete. But the night had only just begun to unfold. The maître d's hesitation cracked open the door for cruelty to walk further in. Charlotte seized it instantly. She leaned forward, manicured fingers tapping the rim of her empty glass, her laughter sharp enough to slice through the violin's uneasy melody. "Proof?" she echoed, her voice dripping disdain. "Darling, if you need proof to sit here, you don't belong here." The words floated across the ballroom, and guests nearby chuckled nervously, like hyenas laughing to cover fear. A man in a navy tux whispered, "She's right. This doesn't look right," while his partner glanced at Amara with a blend of pity and suspicion. The maître d' straightened his back, emboldened by Charlotte's performance. "I'll need to see your credentials," he said firmly, no longer polite. "We cannot have—" His eyes scanned her dress as though it were evidence, unverified attendees at a charity of this caliber. Two servers appeared at his side, summoned by nothing more than his tone. One of them, barely older than 20, fidgeted with his tray, glancing at Amara like he wanted to speak but didn't dare. The other, older and harder, folded his arms. "Security's just outside," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Charlotte to smirk. Amara didn't flinch. She let their words pool at her feet, heavy but powerless. Then she spoke, calm as marble. "I came here for the same reason as you, to support this cause, but instead of service, I'm offered suspicion." Charlotte rolled her eyes dramatically, making sure every gaze returned to her. "Support? Please, do you see her dress?" She gestured with a sneer. "Not a single diamond, not a single name brand anyone here would recognize. I've seen interns try harder." The cruelty landed with a thud, but the silence afterward made it worse. Some guests shifted in discomfort. Others glanced at the stage, as if waiting for the program to rescue them from complicity. No one stepped forward. Not yet. The young server's hand twitched toward his pocket. His phone buzzed again, temptation humming like static. He glanced at the maître d', then back at Amara. His jaw tightened. Still, he said nothing. Amara remembered another room, another dismissal. She was 26, standing in a bank lobby with paperwork for her first property acquisition. The loan officer had looked her up and down and said, "This isn't the kind of account we open for people like you." She had walked out, not with anger, but with resolve, and built an empire that bank later begged to finance. Now, decades later, the words were recycled in new packaging. The sting was familiar, but so was her patience. She placed her water glass down gently, the clink louder than Charlotte's laughter. "So, Because I chose simplicity over spectacle, I don't belong? She asked. The maitre d' stiffened. This is about protocol, madam. No, she corrected, her tone still low but slicing. This is about perception. Charlotte smirked wider, sensing victory. She raised her voice for the entire ballroom. Protocol or perception, it doesn't matter. She is not one of us. Get her out. The older server took a step closer, his arms crossed like a barricade. The younger one swallowed hard, eyes darting between Amara and the growing crowd. Guests leaned forward in their seats, some entertained, others visibly uneasy. And at the far corner, a phone camera finally flickered red. Someone had decided silence wasn't enough. The tension had shifted. The line between insult and action was about to be crossed. The older server's shoes scraped against the marble as he edged closer, posture squared like a guard dog waiting for a command. The maitre d' gave a subtle nod. And suddenly it wasn't just whispers anymore. Amara was the center of a scene no guest could look away from. Yet she did not rise. She did not resist. She let stillness be her armor. The champagne clung to her gown, staining ivory into gold. The liquid cooled against her skin, but her composure never shifted. She adjusted the napkin in her lap, folded once, precisely, as if this were nothing more than a dinner inconvenience. Charlotte's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. Rage thrives on reaction, and Amara gave none. Do you hear me? Charlotte snapped, her voice climbing higher. Security will drag you out if you don't move yourself. Amara lifted her gaze slowly, not to Charlotte, but to the maitre d'. Her eyes held no fury, only weight. Tell me, she said evenly, when you look at me, what is it you really see? A guest or a threat? The words landed heavy. The maitre d's throat tightened. His training told him to keep control, but something in her tone forced hesitation. The younger server shifted his tray, glass stems rattling like nerves made visible. He muttered under his breath, "This isn't right," but the noise of the room swallowed his courage. Guests fidgeted in their chairs. One woman reached for her husband's arm, whispering, "Why doesn't she just leave?" He hushed her, eyes darting nervously to Charlotte, unwilling to risk his place in her orbit. But Amara stayed rooted. She knew the script. She had seen it played before, in banks, in hotels, in boardrooms. Every time, the strategy was the same: force her to defend her right to exist, to push her into rage so they could dismiss her as difficult. Not tonight. Her silence was not absence. It was defiance. Charlotte slammed her glass down, the sound clattering through the hall. Enough games. Show them your invitation, if you even have one. Amara reached for her clutch, slow, deliberate. She slid a slim envelope onto the table, gold embossed, pristine, her name engraved in calligraphy. It caught the chandelier light, undeniable. The maitre d' hesitated. Charlotte snatched it first, scanning the name. Her laugh returned, brittle but loud. Anyone can print stationery. Who did you pay to put this together? The insult drew gasps. A ripple ran across the room. A man at the back muttered, "That's too far." His companion elbowed him quiet. Still, Amara's voice remained level. When you cannot recognize dignity, you invent fraud. That says more about you than me. Her words hung like smoke, impossible to wave away. The older server stepped closer again, emboldened. She's stalling. I'll handle this. Amara turned her head slowly, her gaze landing on him with the weight of years. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lift her hands. You will not touch me. The room froze. Not because she shouted she hadn't, but because her stillness carried the gravity of command. The younger server's tray tilted, one glass slipping, shattering across the marble floor. The crack echoed like punctuation. Something had broken beyond crystal. And still, Amara did not move. The calm wasn't weakness. It was control. It was the kind of control that made enemies nervous, and witnesses start to wonder. The crystal shards on the marble floor glistened like evidence, their edges catching the chandelier's light. Every eye in the ballroom tracked them, but no one bent to clean. The silence wasn't politeness, it was paralysis. Then came the sound. A faint, unmistakable click. The red glow of a phone camera blinked alive at the back of the room. It belonged to Daniel, a junior server barely into his 20s, his uniform slightly loose, sleeves rolled one fold too high. He had watched in silence, tray trembling, until the moment Amara's words anchored in him, "You will not touch me." Something in her stillness had cracked his fear wide open. Now, his thumb hovered over the record button, and he pressed. Charlotte noticed first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Turn that off, she barked across the room. Staff don't record guests. That's grounds for firing. But Daniel didn't lower the phone. His lips parted, shaky but audible. People need to see this. The ripple moved faster this time. Gasps, murmurs, guests shifting in their chairs, finally acknowledging what was unfolding. A woman in pearls whispered, "He's right." Another man frowned, tugging at his bow tie, unsure whether to support or retreat. The maitre d' stiffened. His training screamed at him to seize control, to silence disruption before it spread. He stepped toward Daniel, voice clipped. "You will delete that now." Daniel's knuckles whitened around the phone. "No," he said, louder this time, voice cracking but steady enough. "If I stay quiet, I'm part of it," the older server hissed. "Kid, don't throw away your job for her." Daniel's head snapped toward him, voice breaking through the hush. "For her? She hasn't raised her voice once. You have. You all have." He gestured toward Charlotte, toward the maitre d', toward the circle forming around Amara. "Everyone sees it, everyone hears it." The ballroom shifted again. It wasn't applause, not yet, but it was no longer silence. Guests exchanged looks, some nodding faintly, others pretending to sip wine while their phones slid discreetly into their hands. Screens lit like sparks in dry grass. Charlotte rose to her feet, her magenta gown sweeping like a curtain. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He's some busboy with a camera. Who cares what he thinks?" Her words backfired. They landed not as authority, but as arrogance. The young couple at the next table flinched, the woman muttering, "It is absurd, just not the way she thinks." Amara remained seated, her posture unchanged, but inside she felt the tremor of recognition. Witnesses had always been the missing link. For years, bias lived in shadows, traded in whispers, denied when challenged. Tonight, the room was no longer blind. The record light glowed like truth itself. Daniel lifted his phone higher, his voice steadier now. "You can fire me tomorrow, but tonight, I'm not letting her stand alone." A beat of silence followed, heavier than before, the kind of silence that carried choice. Would the room smother him, or stand with him? At the far end, a woman in a silver shawl raised her chin. She pulled her phone out slowly, deliberately, and aimed her camera at Charlotte. Another guest followed. Then another. The glow spread across the ballroom like lanterns igniting in the dark. Charlotte's smirk crumbled. The maitre d's jaw tightened. The older server stepped back, suddenly aware of the tide shifting. And through it all, Amara remained motionless. She had not asked for a witness, but the witness had come. Her silence had spoken, and now the room was beginning to listen. The ballroom had transformed. What began as a private insult was now public theater. Screens glowed from every corner like quiet spotlights, each guest deciding whether to be complicit or to bear witness. Charlotte's voice cut through the hum, desperate, brittle. "All of you put those phones away. She's nobody. This is a charity event, not a circus." But the words rang hollow. The cameras kept rolling. That was when the event manager arrived, a tall man in a tailored navy suit, headset clipped at his ear, clipboard tucked under his arm like a badge of power. His name was Victor Hale, and he carried himself with the authority of someone used to silencing complaints before they reached the press. "What's going on here?" His tone wasn't curious. It was accusatory. His eyes landed on Amara like a judge who'd already written the verdict. Charlotte seized the opening. "She doesn't belong here. Crashed the gala, made a scene, now staff are disobeying orders because of her." Victor's gaze sharpened. "Is that true?" Amara didn't move. "I arrived with an invitation." Victor extended a hand, impatient. "Then show it. Now." Her envelope still lay on the table, gold embossed, undeniable. She gestured to it with quiet grace, but instead of inspecting it, Victor scoffed. "Anyone can fake stationery. We have standards." The room bristled. Daniel's phone caught every syllable. Victor leaned closer, his voice dropping to a cutting whisper that still carried. "You're disrupting an evening meant for real benefactors, people who matter, and if you don't step outside right now, I'll have security escort you out." Charlotte folded her arms, satisfied. Finally, someone with sense. The older server smirked, emboldened again. "Told you, she's stalling." But the guests weren't as unified as before. A woman in the silver shawl shook her head, muttering, "This is disgraceful." A man at her table added, "She hasn't raised her voice once. Why are they so threatened?" Victor ignored them. He leaned even closer to Amara, his words a blade cloaked in velvet. "This isn't your world. People like you walk in thinking a smile and a dress make you equal. But this hall, these tables, they're reserved for legacy, and you don't have it." The words sliced deeper than Charlotte's champagne, because they weren't shouted. They were whispered truths of prejudice, spoken as policy. Daniel's voice cracked the silence. "Say that again," he demanded, his phone raised higher. "Let everyone hear what you just said." Victor's head snapped toward him. "You're finished. Pack your things. You'll never work another event in this city." But the threat only amplified the murmurs. Guests leaned into one another, whispering their disbelief. Phones multiplied. The tide of recording lights grew stronger. Amara remained still. Her silence made Victor angrier, Charlotte louder, and the room braver. She finally spoke, voice calm as stone. "You mistake control for authority. They're not the same." The statement hung in the charged air. Victor's jaw clenched. "Authority is mine here. Security!" Two men in black suits appeared from the ballroom entrance, their footsteps echoing against the marble. The crowd shifted, unease thickening. Daniel whispered into his phone's mic. "They're calling security on a woman with an invitation, on a donor." Gasps, murmurs. The line between suspicion and spectacle had shattered. And still, Amara didn't rise. She sat anchored, letting their panic reveal itself to every eye, every lens, every whisper. The ballroom doors shut with a heavy thud as the two security men entered. Their black suits cut through the sea of gowns and tuxedos like storm clouds blotting out light. The taller one, broad-shouldered, shaved head, spoke first. "Which guest?" Victor Hale pointed directly at Amara. "Her. Seat 12. Remove her quietly." The order carried arrogance, not caution. He believed the crowd would bend the moment muscle arrived. Charlotte leaned back, smug triumph curling her lips. "Finally," she whispered loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "we can breathe again." The taller guard approached, his shoes echoing against marble, each step louder than the last. He stopped at Amara's side, eyes scanning her soaked gown like she was an uninvited intruder rather than the reason the ballroom even existed. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "you'll need to come with us." Amara didn't rise. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, fingers interlaced. "On what grounds?" The shorter guard stepped forward, irritation tightening his jaw. "Disruption. Fraudulent entry. Now stand." Gasps rippled across the room. Guests whispered into their phones, their cameras trained on the confrontation. A woman at the next table whispered, "She's not disrupting anything." "They are." Daniel raised his voice from the back. "She showed an invitation. Everyone saw it. You're lying." Victor snapped, "Shut that down." His face flushed, but his authority was cracking in real time. The taller guard ignored Daniel, reaching down toward Amara's arm. His hand hovered for a moment, then gripped her wrist with the ease of someone used to compliance. The ballroom erupted gasps, shouts, a clatter of silverware against plates. Someone cried out, "Don't touch her!" Another voice shouted, "This is insane!" Amara's body didn't flinch. She looked at the hand on her wrist, then back up at the guard, her eyes calm, but sharp as glass. "Remove your hand," she said softly, "or you'll lose more than your job." The threat wasn't shouted. It was delivered with the steadiness of someone who had spoken such words before and always kept them. The taller guard hesitated, not because he feared her strength, but because the room itself had turned. Dozens of phones glowed now, recording every second. 1,000 invisible witnesses waited behind those screens. Charlotte broke the pause, her voice shrill with desperation. "Don't listen to her. She's playing you. Get her out before this spreads." But it was already spreading. A guest in a navy suit whispered to his wife, "This will be on the news tonight." She nodded, phone steady in her hand. Amara remained seated, anchored like stone. Her stillness made the guard's grip look clumsy. Victor's authority looked desperate. Charlotte's laughter sounded hollow. The shorter guard leaned in, lowering his voice. "Lady, stand up or we'll make you." Amara turned her head slowly, her gaze piercing. "You've already made your mistake." The chandelier light caught her soaked gown, turning it into a banner not of humiliation, but of endurance. Around her, the murmurs rose into a chorus of protest. A woman in silver shawl stood up. "She hasn't done anything wrong." A man near the stage echoed, "Leave her alone." The tide had shifted, no longer whispers, no longer hidden. The crowd was fracturing and Amara hadn't lifted a single finger. She didn't need to. The violation had already spoken louder than she ever could, and the night was only climbing higher. The guard's hand still circled Amara's wrist, but the room no longer belonged to him. The crowd's murmurs swelled into open objection, the glow of phone screens brighter than the chandeliers. Every second he held on, the cameras devoured him. Amara exhaled slowly, not in defeat but in calculation. She tilted her head toward the guard, her voice silk wrapped around steel. "Release me, now." The taller guard hesitated, but before he could decide, Amara lifted her free hand not to fight, but to tap the small device in her clutch. A single motion, discreet but deliberate. Miles away, in a corporate office lined with glass, an alert lit up on the screen of Nia Thompson, her executive assistant. She didn't need instructions. She'd been waiting for this signal. Her voice carried instantly into Amara's discreet earpiece. "Protocol 1 activated. Do you want escalation?" Amara didn't look away from Victor, who stood smug at the edge of the table. "Yes," she said calmly. "Begin verification." Victor scoffed. "Verification? What, another fake document? You can't bluff your way into belonging." But at that very moment, the ballroom's massive LED screen mounted above the stage for donor recognition flickered. The scrolling list of sponsors paused, glitched, then resumed with a single name highlighted in gold: James Global Holdings. The contribution total dwarfed every other donor combined. A hush fell over the crowd. Whispers rose like smoke. "That's her company," someone murmured. "She's the title sponsor." Charlotte's laugh rang hollow. "Coincidence. Common name." Her voice cracked on the last word. Nia's voice returned in Amara's ear. "Full sponsorship contract linked to your profile. Timestamp transfers. Signed by the Foundation's board. Display authorization ready." Amara's lips curved, calm and cutting. "Proceed." The screen shifted again. This time, the sponsorship document filled the ballroom signature, seal, wire confirmation. And beneath it, her full name, Amara James, CEO. The crowd erupted not in cheers, not yet, but in gasps, in disbelief, in audible shame. The guard released her wrist as though burned. His hand fell to his side, useless. Victor's clipboard trembled against his chest. "That proves nothing," he barked, though his voice cracked. "Anyone could—" But a man near the back interrupted. "Number. That proves everything." He raised his phone higher, catching Victor's desperation on camera. "You humiliated the woman who paid for this night." The ballroom shifted all at once. Guests who had whispered now spoke aloud. "She's the reason we're here. They tried to throw her out? Unbelievable." Charlotte paled, her magenta gown suddenly garish beneath the lights. This is a setup," she stammered. "She planted this to embarrass us." Amara finally rose from her chair. Not hurried, not loud. Each movement precise, deliberate. Champagne dripped from her gown, but she wore it like armor. She faced Victor first. "You wanted verification. There at Island." Then Charlotte. "You wanted humiliation. Look around." Silence thickened. Even the violinist set his bow down. Nia's voice carried through the earpiece once more. "Do you want escalation to phase 2? Amara's gaze swept the room, the witnesses, the screens. Her voice was calm, absolute. "Yes, begin audit. Log every word." The counter-strike had begun, and the night was no longer theirs, it was hers. The ballroom's air turned heavy, as if the chandeliers themselves were waiting to fall. All eyes fixed on Amara as she rose from her chair, champagne dripping from her gown onto marble in steady drops that sounded louder than Charlotte's desperate breathing. The LED screen glowed above the stage, Amara's name emblazoned in gold beside numbers that dwarfed every other donation combined. Guests shifted uneasily, their phones now angled not just at her but at Victor, at Charlotte, at the guards who had dared to touch her. She let the silence stretch. Every second of it was power reclaimed. Then she spoke. "I came here tonight as a guest, quietly, without entourage, without announcement. And in return," her gaze swept across Charlotte, "Victor, the maitre d', the guards, I was called a fraud, a trespasser, a problem to be erased." Her voice didn't rise, yet every syllable reached the back of the hall. It was the kind of calm that made hearts pound louder than shouting ever could. Charlotte tried to interrupt, her tone shrill. "You're twisting this." But Amara's eyes cut to her, silencing her mid-sentence. Then she turned back to the room. "You wanted proof. You wanted verification. You tore at my presence because my dress wasn't loud enough, because my skin didn't match your expectation of wealth. But here is the truth." She stepped forward, each stride precise, controlled. This gala exists because of me. These lights shine because of me. The very wine you poured on me was bought with my money. Gasps rippled. A woman clutched her pearls, whispering, "She's not just a donor, she's the sponsor." Amara stopped at the edge of the stage, her gaze steady on Victor. "You said this hall belongs to legacy. You're right. Tonight's legacy has my signature all over it." Victor's clipboard slipped from his grip, crashing against the floor. His jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed him fear, raw and unmasked. The taller guard stepped back, his voice faltering. "Ma'am, I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Amara replied. The LED screen shifted again, this time revealing a second slide photographs from earlier in the year. Amara at a groundbreaking ceremony, Amara handing over the oversized check to the foundation, Amara standing beside the very board members who had entrusted her with the title sponsorship. Evidence layered over evidence, undeniable. The murmurs turned into declarations. "She's the sponsor. They tried to throw her out." Phones angled higher, capturing every flinch, every paling face of those who had mocked her. Amara lifted her chin. "You tried to erase me from a room I built. And for what? For appearances, for comfort, for the illusion of power." Charlotte's face drained of color. Her magenta gown looked cheap now, desperate. She whispered, barely audible, "This can't be happening." Amara's gaze lingered on her, unblinking. It already has. The ballroom erupted not with applause, not yet but with the electric hum of revelation. No one could pretend ignorance anymore. Amara stood beneath the golden glow of her own name, no longer silent, no longer mistaken. The reveal was complete, and the reckoning was only beginning. The ballroom no longer looked like a place of celebration. It looked like a reckoning. The chandeliers still glittered, the string quartet still sat frozen with instruments in hand, but the atmosphere had changed. The elegance was gone. What remained was truth, raw and undeniable. Amara stood at the center, her champagne-soaked gown clinging to her frame like armor forged in fire. Around her, the guilty shrank Victor pale and defeated, the guards stiff and silent, Charlotte trembling in a gown that now seemed more like a costume than power. She let the silence breathe, long enough for every camera to focus, every heart to pound. Then she spoke. "I didn't need to raise my voice tonight. I didn't need to shout for justice." Her tone was steady, deliberate, a blade honed by years of endurance. Because justice was already here. Justice is what happens when truth refuses to be erased. Phones trembled in hands. Guests leaned forward, captivated. Amara's gaze swept across the room, settling briefly on Charlotte. "You poured champagne to wash me away, but you only revealed yourselves. Cruelty is loud, but dignity is louder. And tonight, everyone heard it." Charlotte's knees weakened. She clutched the back of a chair for balance. Amara turned to Victor. "You spoke of legacy. You told me I didn't belong. But legacy isn't marble plaques or last names whispered in ballrooms. Legacy is the choice to stand when others stay seated. Legacy is the witness who says, 'This is wrong.' Legacy is truth that survives humiliation." Daniel's phone shook in his hands, but his eyes gleamed with pride. He whispered, "Yes," as if she'd spoken directly to him. Amara looked out at the crowd, her voice lifting not in volume, but in resonance. "To everyone recording, remember this. Silence can feel safe, but silence is also surrender. Tonight, you saw what happens when silence ends." The room stirred, some guests nodding, others bowing their heads in shame. The violinist finally set his bow down completely, tears welling in his eyes. Amara straightened her shoulders, her final words sharp as glass. "I am not the story you tried to write. I am not the scandal you hoped for. I am the result, and I will never be erased." The ballroom broke. Applause erupted, some hesitant, some thunderous, but all undeniable. The sound rose and filled the hall, echoing against marble and glass. Guests stood, not for Charlotte, not for Victor, but for the woman they had tried to erase. Charlotte slumped into her chair, face hidden behind trembling hands. Victor stared at the floor, clipboard forgotten, his authority shattered. The guards melted into the shadows, powerless. Amara did not bow. She did not smile. She simply stood, soaked in champagne and spotlight, her silence more victorious than any ovation. The LED screen behind her froze on her name, Amara James, CEO, title sponsor. The message was clear. Dignity doesn't need defense, it only needs truth. And tonight, truth had spoken.